Caltharax the Undying had lived for 12,000 years and had consumed more souls than there were stars in some galaxies. And in all that time, he had never seen prey behave like these humans. He stood in the command chamber of his flagship. The endless hunger, surrounded by lesser demons who trembled at his every word. And he watched the battle unfold with growing confusion. The hunting him had failed. This alone was impossible, for it had never failed before. The hymn was designed to reach into the deepest parts of a creature's mind and pull out every fear, every nightmare, every terrible memory, and the psychic weight of so much terror would crush even the strongest will. But when the hymn touched human minds, something strange happened. Instead of breaking, the humans seemed to grow stronger. As if fear was a fuel they could burn, as if terror was just another weapon they could turn against their enemies. Caltharax reached out with his ancient mind and touched the thoughts of the human admiral, searching for the weakness he knew must be there. What he found made him recoil in shock. Her mind was not empty of fear. She was terrified. In fact, more afraid than she had ever been in her life. But wrapped around that fear like armor was something else. Something that burned so hot it hurt to touch. It was rage, pure, undying, bottomless rage, and it had been building inside her for decades. Growing with every world she lost, every friend she buried, every child she watched die. The fear was still there, but she had learned to convert it into something else. To transform her terror into fuel for a fire that would never stop burning. Caltharax pulled back from her mind with something very close to caution. And for the first time in 3,000 years, he gave a direct order to his fleet. Board the enemy ships, he commanded, his voice echoing through the psychic network that linked all Vethkai together. I want prisoners. I want to understand what these creatures are. The demons obeyed. And boarding pods launched from 100 Crimson warships toward the battered human vessels. What happened next would give the Vethkai nightmares for generations on the cruiser Leningrad. A boarding party of 30 demons cut through the hull and expected to find cowering survivors ready to be harvested. Instead, they found Chief Petty Officer Ivan Volkov waiting for them with a welding torch and a smile. He killed 6 of them before they brought him down, and his last words were a curse so creative that the Vethkai translators could not even process it on the frigate Nairobi. The demons captured a group of wounded humans and tried to feed on their fear, tried to drain their terror as they had done to countless other species, but the humans would not cooperate. Ensign Sarah Okonkwo had a broken leg and burns covering half her body. And when the demons reached into her mind to pull out her worst memories, she showed them her wedding day, her daughter's first steps, her mother's smile. She showed them love instead of fear. And the psychic feedback made 3 demons collapse. In agony, Private Chen Wei was even worse when they tried to torture him. He started laughing, not the mad laughter of a broken mind, but the genuine laughter of someone who found the situation genuinely funny. You think this hurts? He asked through bloody teeth. My drill sergeant back on Luna was scarier than you. And she was 5 feet tall. The demons could not understand these creatures. Every species they had ever encountered processed fear the same way. It paralyzed them, weakened them, made them easy to harvest. But humans seemed to process fear differently. Seemed to have evolved some strange ability to take their terror and twist it into something else entirely. Some converted it into rage, like the Admiral, and became more dangerous the more afraid they were. Some converted it into defiance, like Ensign Okonkwo, and found strength in the things they loved. Some converted it into humor, like Private Chun, and laughed in the face of death as if it was just another problem to solve. And some, the most dangerous ones, converted it into cold, calculating focus, becoming more effective and more deadly as their situation grew more desperate. Caltharax watched the reports come in and felt something he had not experienced in millennia. He felt curious genuinely, dangerously curious about these strange creatures who refused to behave like prey. He ordered his scientists to examine the captured humans, to dissect their minds and their bodies, and find the source of their impossible resistance. The reports that came back were disturbing. Human brains were different from every other species the Vethkai had encountered, wired in strange and unexpected ways that allowed them to override their basic survival instincts, where other species froze when faced with danger. Humans could choose to fight, where other species surrendered when outmatched. Humans could choose to resist, where other species broke under torture. Humans could choose to endure. It was not that humans felt no fear. They felt fear as strongly as any other species, perhaps even more strongly. But somewhere in their evolution, on that strange blue planet so far from here, humans had developed the ability to feel fear and keep fighting anyway. They had learned to make fear their servant instead of their master. And this simple ability had made them something entirely new in the galaxy. Caltharax looked at the data and made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his long life. Increase the assault, he ordered. Destroy their ships, harvest their souls, and leave nothing behind. These creatures are too dangerous to let survive. But even as he gave the order, the ancient demon felt a small cold seed of something unfamiliar taking root in his chest. It was not fear, not yet, but it was the beginning of something that might grow into fear if given time. And as he watched the human ships continue to fight despite impossible odds, as he watched them die by the hundreds while taking thousands of demons with them, Caltharax began to wonder if perhaps the Vethkai had made a terrible mistake. Perhaps they should have left humanity alone. Perhaps some prey was not worth hunting, but it was too late now. And the battle continued, and somewhere in the darkness of space, the last human starship prepared for its final stand. The galaxy had known peace for 10,000 years. But it was not the peace of friendship or trust. It was the peace of fear. The silence of prey hiding from a predator that never slept and never forgot. The Vethkai ruled everything between the stars. And the younger species of the galaxy called them demons because no other word could capture what they truly were. They stood 9 feet tall with skin like black iron and eyes that burned with cold fire. And when they spoke, their voices crawled inside the minds of lesser creatures and made them scream for 100 centuries. The Vethkai had moved from world to world, harvesting entire civilizations like farmers collecting grain, feeding on the fear and terror of billions of souls until nothing remained but empty cities and silent graves. No species had ever defeated them, and no species had ever tried, not truly, not with everything they had. When the Crimson Armada appeared in the sky above New Constantinople, humanity's last colony world, every alien observer in the galaxy knew what would happen next. The Galactic Council, that great assembly of 1,000 cowardly species, sent messages of condolence to human diplomats who were already dead. They recorded the date in their histories as the day humanity went extinct, and they prepared their archives to document another fallen civilization. Admiral Helen Navarro stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus and watched 3,000 enemy warships block out the stars. She was 57 years old with gray hair, cut short, and a face that had forgotten how to show fear. And she had buried 2 husbands and 3 children in the wars that had pushed humanity to this final corner of space. Behind her stood 17 ships, all that remained of the once great human fleet. There was the destroyer Tokyo Maru with her crew of brave souls who had survived the burning of Mars, and the cruiser Leningrad, whose captain had lost his entire family on Earth, and the frigate Nairobi, whose young crew had never known a home that was not a spaceship. These were not soldiers fighting for glory or conquest. These were the last survivors of a species that had been hunted across the galaxy, and they had nothing left to lose. The Vethkai Supreme Hierarch, Caltharax the Undying, broadcast his hunting hymn across all frequencies. It was a psychic scream that traveled through space and metal and bone. A sound that had shattered the minds of 100 conquered species and turned proud warriors into weeping children. The council observers recorded everything from their safe positions far from the battle, expecting to witness the moment when humanity broke and begged for mercy. But when the hymn reached the human crews, something strange happened aboard the Prometheus. Admiral Varro tilted her head as if listening to distant music. And then she smiled, not a smile of fear or madness, but the cold smile of a wolf who sees its prey. On the Tokyo Maru, the crew began to sing their own song, an old war chant from the island nation that had given their ship its name on the Leningrad. The captain stood from his chair and laughed a deep and terrible laugh that echoed through his ship like thunder. The hunting hymn that had broken 100 species bounced off human minds like water off stone. And in the silence that followed, the Vethkai felt something they had not experienced in 10,000 years. They felt surprise. Admiral Varro opened the channel to her fleet, and her voice was calm and steady as she spoke words that would echo through galactic history. All ships, this is Prometheus today. We teach the demons what happens when they hunt the wrong prey. And if we die so hard that they will remember our names for 1,000 years. The 17 human ships moved forward, not retreating, not spreading out, but charging directly at the heart of the Crimson Armada like wolves running toward a forest fire. The council observers could not believe what they were seeing. Every species they had ever watched had tried to run, had tried to hide, had tried to surrender, but these humans attacked with a fury that seemed almost insane. The first volleys of fire lit up the darkness of space, and human ships began to take damage. Shields failed on the frigate Nairobi, but she kept flying forward, her weapons blazing. The cruiser Leningrad lost her port engines, but her captain simply redirected power and kept fighting. And when the destroyer Tokyo Maru found herself surrounded by 5 Vethkai dreadnoughts, her captain made a choice that no alien mind could understand. He ordered full speed ahead, and the Tokyo Maru rammed directly through the core of the largest enemy ship, tearing it apart in a ball of fire that consumed both vessels. The crew of the Tokyo Maru died singing, and their last transmission was not a scream of fear, but a battle cry that made even the demons pause. The council observers stopped taking notes. They had watched 1,000 battles and 1,000 extinctions, but they had never seen anything like this. These humans were not fighting to win. They knew they could not win. They were fighting to make their enemy bleed, to prove that even the weakest prey could bite back, to write their names in fire across the black canvas of space. And in that moment, watching 17 ships charge against 3,000, the observers began to understand something that would change the galaxy forever. They began to understand why the Vethkai should have left humanity alone. Admiral Varro watched the Tokyo Maru die and felt something cold and hard settle into her heart. There would be no mercy today, not for her people, and not for the demons. She turned to her crew and spoke the words that would become humanity's promise to the stars. For every one of us they kill, we take 100 of them, make them pay in blood and fire, and let the galaxy see what humans do when we have nothing left to lose. The battle had only just begun, and the demons had no idea what was coming. By the 3rd day of the battle, only the Prometheus remained. Every other human ship had been destroyed, each one dying in a blaze of fire and defiance that had cost the Vethkai dearly. The Tokyo Maru had taken 4 dreadnoughts with her. When she rammed into the enemy formation, the Leningrad had fought for 18 hours straight before her reactor finally gave out, and her captain had crashed the burning wreck into a demon carrier as his final act. The Nairobi, the smallest ship in the fleet, had somehow destroyed 11 enemy vessels before a lucky shot finally silenced her guns. And now the Prometheus floated alone in a sea of wreckage and dead ships. Her hull torn open in 17 places, her weapons running low on ammunition. Her crew reduced to less than half their original number. Admiral Helena Varro sat in her command chair and looked at the damage reports. With her one remaining eye, she had lost her left arm in the first day of fighting when a console exploded next to her. And a piece of shrapnel had taken her eye on the second day. Her doctors had wanted to sedate her, to put her in the medical bay where she could rest and heal. But she had refused. There would be time to rest when she was dead. And that time was coming soon enough. Status report, she said, her voice calm and steady despite the pain that burned through every nerve. In her body, Lieutenant Commander James Park looked at his console and tried to hide the despair in his eyes. 17. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 9, he reported. Main weapons are at 30%, shields are gone. And we have maybe 6 hours of life support left. The enemy has us surrounded with approximately 200 warships, and they appear to be preparing for a final boarding action. Varro nodded slowly, processing the information with the cold efficiency that had made her the most feared admiral in human space. Then we have 6 hours to make them regret ever hearing the name Prometheus, she said. And she pressed the ship-wide communication button. All hands. This is the Admiral. The enemy is coming to take our ship. And I need every person who can hold a weapon to prepare for close combat. We are going to show these demons what happens when you corner a human with nothing left to lose. Throughout the dying ship, men and women who should have been in hospital beds rose and found weapons. Chief Engineer Marcus Chan had third-degree burns, covering 40% of his body, and his left hand was a ruin of melted flesh and broken bone. But he picked up a plasma rifle and walked to his assigned position without complaint. Sergeant Yuki Tanaka had been awake for 60 hours straight and had a piece of metal lodged in her shoulder that she refused to let anyone remove. But she sharpened her combat knife and smiled at the thought of what was coming. Dr. Elena Vasquez had run out of painkillers 2 days ago and had been performing surgery with nothing but local anesthetics and sheer willpower. But she strapped a pistol to her hip and prepared to defend her patients. These were the last humans in the battle, the final survivors of a species that refused to die quietly. And they built barricades from the bodies of their fallen friends, rigged corridors with explosive charges, and wrote their final messages home on walls that would soon be stained with blood. The Vethkai boarding pods hit the Prometheus like a swarm of metal locusts, cutting through the weakened hull and disgorging hundreds of demons into the corridors of the dying ship. What they expected was easy prey. Wounded survivors too weak to fight, too broken to resist. What they found was a nightmare. Chief Engineer Marcus Chun met the first wave on Deck 7 with a squad of wounded engineers who had nothing left to lose. They fought with plasma rifles until the rifles ran dry. Then they fought with tools and pipes and bare fists. And when Marcus saw that his position was about to be overrun, he detonated the port reactor bay and took 400 demons with him into the fire. The explosion rocked the entire ship and opened 3 new holes in the hull. But it also bought time for the other defenders to reposition. Sergeant Yuki Tanaka held the corridor leading to the bridge for 6 hours straight, standing over a growing pile of demon bodies with a fire axe in one hand and a broken sword in the other. She sang old songs from her grandmother's homeland as she fought, ancient war chants that had been old when humanity first reached for the stars. And her voice echoed through the corridors like a promise of death when a demon finally got past her guard and put a claw through her stomach. She grabbed its arm with both hands and headbutted it so hard that its skull cracked. Then she picked up her axe and kept fighting until blood loss finally took her. Dr. Elena Vasquez ran out of ammunition defending her medical bay and performed emergency surgery on herself to remove a piece of shrapnel from her lung. then picked up a scalpel and went back to fighting. She killed 3 demons with that scalpel before they brought her down. And her last words were instructions to her surviving nurses on how to treat the wounded. The Galactic Council observers watched all of this through the sensors of their distant ships, and they could not look away. They had seen 1,000 battles and 1,000 last stands, but they had never seen anything like this. These humans knew they were going to die. There was no hope of rescue, no possibility of victory, no chance of survival, but they fought anyway, not to win but to hurt. Not to survive, but to make their enemy pay for every inch of ground, every corridor, every room. And as the hours passed and the pile of demon dead grew higher and higher, the observers began to understand something that would change the way they saw the universe forever. They began to understand that courage was not the absence of fear. Courage was feeling fear so strongly that it burned like fire in your veins, and choosing to fight anyway. Courage was knowing that you were going to die, and making sure that your death meant something. Courage was being human, and as the Prometheus slowly died around them, her crew showed the galaxy what courage truly looked like. Caltharax the Undying walked through the corridors of the dying Prometheus, and for the first time in 3,000 years, he was afraid. He would not admit it, not even to himself. But the cold feeling in his chest was unmistakable. It was the same feeling he had given to 1 billion lesser creatures across 100 worlds. And now he understood why they had screamed. The ship around him was a tomb, filled with the bodies of his warriors and the humans who had killed them. He had brought 10,000 elite demons aboard this single vessel, the finest warriors of the Vethkai Empire, soldiers who had conquered species without losing a single member. More than half of them were dead. He stepped over the body of a human female who had died with her teeth buried in a demon's throat, and he marveled at the savagery of it. This woman had been a doctor, her uniform said as much, and yet she had killed 3 of his warriors before they stopped her, fighting with nothing but a small medical blade and an apparently endless supply of hatred. How did a healer learn to kill with such fury? What kind of species produced doctors who died with blood on their teeth? Caltharax walked on, following the trail of bodies, toward the bridge where his scouts reported. The human admiral was making her final stand. He had not personally participated in combat for 3,000 years. He was far too valuable to risk in battle, and his mere presence usually caused enemy commanders to surrender in terror. But this battle was different. These humans had killed more Vethkai in 3 days than some species had killed in century-long wars. And Caltharax needed to understand why. He needed to look into the eyes of their leader and see what made these creatures so dangerous. The doors to the bridge had been welded shut and then blown open, and the corridor leading to them was carpeted with bodies, demons and humans tangled together in death. Enemies who had killed each other at close range with weapons in hands and teeth. Caltharax stepped through the doorway and found himself facing the last human warrior in the battle. Admiral Helena Varro was propped against her command chair, unable to stand but still holding a plasma pistol in her remaining hand. She was dying, anyone could see that, with wounds that would have killed a lesser creature hours ago, but her eyes were still sharp, still focused, still burning with that impossible fire that Caltharax had seen in every human he had encountered. Around her lay the bodies of his elite guard, 12 of the finest warriors in the Empire, all dead by her hand. She had killed them while missing an arm and bleeding from a dozen wounds. And the last one she had apparently strangled with her own intestines after he had torn open her stomach. Caltharax had never seen anything so horrifying or so beautiful. "You are the Admiral," he said, his ancient voice echoing through the ruined bridge. "You have cost me greatly." Little creature more than any enemy in 10,000 years. Helena Varro looked up at him with her one remaining eye. And she smiled a thin, bloody smile that held no fear at all. "Good," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I hope it hurt." Calthrax reached out with his mind, pushing past her weakened defenses to search for the fear he knew must be hiding somewhere inside her. He needed to feed, he always needed to feed, and this woman's terror would be the sweetest meal he had ever tasted. But when he entered her mind, he found something unexpected. She was afraid, terrified. In fact, but not of him and not of death. She was afraid that she had not done enough, that her sacrifice had been in vain, that her children would not escape, that humanity would truly end here in the darkness between the stars. And wrapped around that fear, burning so brightly that it blinded his psychic senses, was the memory she had chosen to show him. He saw a small ship, a transport vessel, hidden in the debris field of a dead moon, and inside that ship were children. Dozens of human children being carried to safety by a skeleton crew of elderly volunteers. Her children were on that ship. Her daughter, her son, the grandchildren she had never met. They were alive. They were escaping, and they would carry humanity forward into the future. Calthrax tried to pull back, but she held him there, forcing him to see what she wanted him to see. He saw the children growing up in exile, learning the stories of what happened here, memorizing the names of the dead, swearing oaths of vengeance that would bind them and their descendants for 1,000 generations. He saw fleets being built in secret shipyards, weapons being forged in hidden factories, an army being raised in the darkness between the stars. He saw humans returning, not in years or decades, but in centuries, patient and relentless, growing stronger with each generation while the Vethkai grew complacent. And then she showed him her final message, the thought she had prepared just for him. The promise she wanted him to carry for the rest of his long and terrible life. "I'm going to kill you," a voice echoed in his mind, calm and certain. "And if I fail, my children will. And if they fail, their children will. We do not forgive. We do not forget. And we are coming for you across every star and every century until we find you, and we will find you. For the first time in 10,000 years. A demon-flinched Calthrax pulled back from her mind, staggering as if he had been struck. And he looked at the dying woman with new eyes. She was not just a warrior. She was a message. A promise written in blood and fire and pain. A warning to the Vethkai that their empire had made a terrible mistake. Helena Varro saw the fear in his ancient eyes, and her smile grew wider. "Now you understand," she whispered. And her hand moved to a panel on her command chair. "Now you know what humans really are." She pressed a button, and somewhere deep in the ship, the Nova Core began to overload. Calthrax ran, for the first time in 12,000 years. The supreme hierarch of the Vethkai Empire ran from a single dying human, and the fear in his heart burned brighter than any sun. The Prometheus exploded with the light of a newborn star. And for one brief moment, the darkness between the stars became day. Admiral Helena Varro died in that fire, along with the last 300 humans who had stayed aboard to hold the demons in place, to keep them trapped on the ship until the Nova Core could finish its deadly work. 700 Vethkai warships died with them, caught too close to escape the artificial sun that bloomed in the heart of their fleet. Their ancient hulls melting like ice in a furnace. It was the single largest loss the Vethkai Empire had ever suffered in a single moment, and the shockwave of psychic death that rippled through the demon fleet drove 100 warriors mad on the spot. Calthrax survived, barely dragging his ruined body through an emergency teleport, just as the fire consumed his boarding pod. He materialized on the bridge of the endless hunger with burns covering half his body and his ancient mind screaming with the echoes of Helena Varro's final message. But the physical damage was nothing compared to what had happened to his soul when he had touched the Admiral's mind, when she had held him there and forced him to see her promise, the psychic link that connected all. HFY had carried that message to every demon in the fleet. 3 million warriors had felt what he felt. 3 million souls had seen what he saw. 3 million minds now carried the image of human children escaping into the darkness, growing stronger, swearing vengeance, preparing to return, and worst of all, 3 million demons now understood something that shook the very foundation of their empire. Humans could not be harvested. Their fear was poison. Their rage was fire. And their hatred was a weapon that could reach across centuries to wound enemies. Not yet born, Caltharax stood on his bridge and looked at the wreckage of his fleet, at the 2,000 ships that remained from the 3,000 he had brought to harvest a single species. And he felt something he had not experienced since he was a young warrior still learning to feed. He felt doubt the Galactic Council observers were still watching, their sensors recording everything that happened. And Caltharax knew that within days, this footage would spread to every corner of the galaxy. Every species would see what happened here. Every world would learn that the mighty HFY had lost nearly a third of their fleet to a handful of human ships. That the demons who had ruled unchallenged for 10,000 years had finally met an enemy they could not break. But it was worse than that, far worse. The other species would not just see a military defeat. They would see the HFY afraid. They would watch Caltharax, the undying run from a dying woman. And they would understand that even demons could feel fear. That even the masters of the galaxy had weaknesses that could be exploited. The Empire would never recover from this shame. Caltharax made a decision that would echo through history. A choice that would puzzle scholars for 1,000 years. He ordered the retreat. All ships withdraw from this system. His voice echoed through the fleet, heavy with exhaustion and something that might have been grief. We are leaving now. His subordinates stared at him in shock. They had won technically. They had won. The human fleet was destroyed. The last starship was dust and ash. And there was nothing left to oppose them. But Caltharax knew better. He had seen Helena Varro's promise, had felt the absolute certainty in her dying mind. And he knew that this battle was just the beginning. Somewhere out there, hidden in the spaces between the stars, human children were growing up with hatred in their hearts and vengeance in their souls. Somewhere out there, a new generation was learning the names of the fallen, memorizing the stories of the Prometheus and the Tokyo Maru and the Leningrad, swearing oaths that would bind them for life. Somewhere out there, humanity was preparing to return, and when they came back, not if, when they would be stronger, more numerous, more determined than ever. The HFY could hunt them down now, could spend centuries searching every corner of the galaxy for the survivors, could dedicate every resource to wiping humanity from existence. But Caltharax looked at his damaged fleet, at his traumatized warriors, at the fear that now lived in his own ancient heart. And he knew that his people did not have the will for such a hunt. They had tasted human hatred, and it had left a mark that would not heal as the Crimson Armada turned and fled, abandoning the system they had come to conquer. Caltharax broadcast a warning to his entire species through the psychic network that connected all. HFY, do not hunt the humans, he commanded, his voice echoing through millions of minds across 1,000 worlds. There is no fear in them, only fury, only fire. They are not prey. They are something worse. Leave them alone, forever, and pray that they forget we exist. The Galactic Council observers transmitted their recordings home in stunned silence, not quite believing what they had witnessed. A species that had ruled the galaxy through terror for 10,000 years had just retreated from 17 ships and a single world the demons had met. Something they could not defeat, could not break, could not understand, and they had fled within a generation. The word human would become the galaxy's term for monsters, but not the kind that hunted and killed without mercy. No. Human would mean the other kind of monster, the kind that fought back, the kind that never surrendered, the kind that made even demons afraid, and somewhere in the darkness of uncharted space, a small transport ship carried its cargo of children toward a hidden moon and a forgotten system. 17 children watched recordings of their parents' final stand, saw the Prometheus explode in a ball of fire, heard Admiral Helena Varro's final message playing on repeat through the ship's speakers. They were too young to fully understand what they had lost, but they understood enough. They understood that their parents had died to save them. They understood that the demons had taken everything from them, and they understood that someday soon, they would grow up, and they would build ships, and they would teach their children the same lessons they had learned. They would return to the stars with fire in their hearts and vengeance in their souls. And the galaxy would learn to fear the name humanity all over again. The oldest child, a girl of 12 with her mother's gray eyes and her father's stubborn jaw, looked at the recording one more time and made a promise that would echo through generations. "We remember," she whispered. "We remember everything, and we are coming." The stars waited, cold and patient, for the children of the Prometheus to grow up, and somewhere in the empire of the Vethkai, ancient demons dreamed of human eyes and human hatred, and they did not sleep easily, for they knew in their darkest hearts that the children would keep their promise, humanity would return, and this time, the demons would be the prey.